Everybody's in a good mood. It's a glorious day out there. God has granted us a beautiful day to be inside for just a little bit. And it's a beautiful day to be outside. And I had several of you actually ask, why don't we just do this outside? And I will tell you why. I have done that before, and I won't do it again. Two reasons. Number one, some of you more mature folks have trouble hearing with traffic in the background. And I've done that before, and like I said, I don't have to do it again. All right. How about people you would like to, how about praises you would offer? Praises? God's not doing anything out there? Hey, okay, Barb? 5 bypasses. Wow. Wow. Yes. A friend of theirs. A friend of theirs, yes. Yes, ma'am. A 105. That's a birthday now. That is a praise. Yes. Others? Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you for that. I'm honored to be a part of you guys. You doing. People would be amazed if they knew everything that we do. But if we reported everything that we did, we wouldn't have time to do what we do. So we're going to do and let God do the reporting. Yeah. All right, other blessings. Yes. Okay. Pregnant with a third baby. Yes. That's the daughter. Yeah. Okay, I've got a couple of things to report for you. Robin Peterson is home from the hospital. Surgery was a success. She's doing well and hopes to be at church on Sunday. Also, Sharon Zeller, who had a stroke, is also at home and doing better. So we thank God for that. Are there others you'd like to lift up? People on your minds? Yes, ma'am. Denise Dorman. Continue prayers for Denise. She fell about the same time Marcia did, but hit a little bit harder. Others? Yes, ma'am. All the way in the back. Marta? Your son needs a job. We will pray for that. Absolutely. Pray for the situation in Israel as well. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Your son needs a job too, okay? Yes, we do. And welcome back, Melinda. All right. Others? Okay, let us pray together. Lord, thank you for a glorious day. Thank you for the opportunity and the freedom to be here as brothers and sisters in Christ. We are grateful for the answer to so many prayers. We're grateful for the blessings of our lives. We have mentioned several things, but there are others represented among us, and we know that. And we ask that you touch them with your love and your grace. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, we are in 2 Corinthians. We're going to do 2 chapters again today, 10 and 11. We're going to do 12 and 13 next week, which will be the end of 2 Corinthians. Now, we're going from 2 Corinthians to 1 and 2 Timothy. We'll continue. We'll finish up 2 Corinthians next week. We're going to 1 and 2 Timothy. I know that first and Second Corinthians has been pretty heavy. At times, very heavy. That's one of the reasons I like to go to First and Second Timothy afterwards, because First and Second Timothy is affirmation. Paul is saying to Timothy, Timothy, you can do it. You can do it. And we need to hear that after First and Second Corinthians. Today, 2 Corinthians has been very positive, really, up until this point. Today, the tenor changes. 2 Corinthians was written to say to the church at Corinth, we're so glad, I'm so glad that you responded so favorably to the harsh letter that I sent. And that's a letter between 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. However, something has changed at this point. There's a couple of different theories. Normally, when you and I sit down to write a letter, or at least let me say for myself, I generally do it all in one setting, maybe two settings. But the letters that Paul wrote probably took a great deal of time to compose. And then when he got them like he wanted them, then he would send them off. Well, in the writing of 2 Corinthians, it seems as if after chapter 9 and before chapter 10, Paul gets some news. And his tone changes tremendously. So chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13 are, let's just say the tone has changed. There are some scholars who believe that the harsh letter that was written after 1 Corinthians and before 2 Corinthians is actually chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13. That letter was tacked on to the end of 2 Corinthians. That might be the case, it might not. But it is virtually universally agreed that Paul is indeed the author of chapters 10 through 13. So let's dive into chapter 10. Listen to the difference in the tone. We go from thanking them for their generous gift and encouraging them to be generous and encouraging us to be generous. And listen to his tone as we begin chapter 10. By the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you. I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold when away. I beg you that when I come, I may not have to be as bold as I expect to be towards some people who think that we live by the standard of this world. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine powers to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. So you hear the change in his tone? He goes, I've got a report that you guys think that I'm meek and mild when I'm with you and bold when I am away. But wait till I get there. You'll find out that what I was trying to do is be kind. You see, there's a lot of sarcasm in his voice. Apparently, what has happened, at some point, the infiltrators, the people that are trying to subvert Paul's teaching and subvert what he had done among them, are saying, that Paul guy, he just used you. He was just buttering you up while he was here. And now that he's gone, you listen to how harsh he is and how he's really a phony is what he is. And Paul says, we'll see. We'll see. And then you're going to hear him say, you know, we proved ourselves as to who we are. We proved what is in our hearts and what we are by how we lived and how we acted among you. I made a statement a couple of sermons ago that every time there's another form of social media that comes about, my counseling caseload goes up, and that's really true, because people will say things online and in media form that they won't say to people face to face. And I can remember, I've been very, very fortunate. Most of the stuff that has gone online about me has been pretty positive, but every once in a while there is a negative comment. And I remember the first time there was a real negative comment that came out, and one of my members said, "Oh, look what they said about you on Facebook." I said, "Number one, what is Facebook?" And then they had to explain what Facebook was, and then they showed me this comment. And I said, "Oh, okay." And they said, "Well, aren't you going to respond?" I said, "No." How are you going to handle this? I said, "I'm going to live it down. I'm going to live it down." Now, there are some things that you need to respond to. I understand that. I trust me, I understand that. But there's a lot of things that the only way you can handle them is to live a life where it shows that it's not true. And this particular thing happened to be something that by my life I could show that anybody who knows me in any depth whatsoever knows that that's just not the case. Paul says, I have proven myself to you. And yet are you so easily deceived that you don't remember how we were when we were there? We don't use the weapons of this world. The weapons of this world are backbiting, gossiping, slander. But the weapons of God are righteousness, goodness, kindness, and living a life worthy of Christ. So Paul is saying, we don't use the weapons those people among you are using. Those weapons of slander, those weapons of gossip, those weapons of lying. But rather, I want you to remember how we were when we were among you, what weapons we used. Verse 5, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. In other words, we are not only do we live, but we even watch what we say, we watch how we live, we watch every aspect of who we are to make it captive for Christ. Verse 6, and we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. Once we get back and remind you of who we are, and you're reminded of who you are, then we will take care of those that are causing the trouble among you. Okay, questions. You see how his tenor, his tone has really changed from encouraging them and saying, "Now I'm so glad that you guys are being so generous, and I'm counting on you to be generous again." And then he just takes a right turn. So something has happened. I get a kick on Sunday morning of walking up to groups of people and getting right in the middle of, finding myself in the middle of conversations that I have absolutely no idea what came before. And there are times that I just after I do that, I just keep on going because I know I don't know enough to be a part of this particular conversation. Questions, observations? Okay, let's move on then. We're at verse 7. You are looking only on the surface of things. If anyone is confident that he belongs to Christ, he should consider again that we belong to Christ. We belong to Christ just as much as he. For even if I boast somewhat freely about the authority the Lord has given me for building you up rather than pulling you down, I will not be ashamed of it. I do not want to seem to be trying to frighten you with my letters. For some say his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person he is unimpressive, and his speaking amounts to nothing. Such people should realize that what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. Saying these people that are slandering us, we will deal with when we get there. What he wants to do is he wants them to be reminded of who he was while he was there. I've been smiling to myself as I prepared for this because what I know is that bad pastors get worse with time and distance. And good pastors get better with time and distance. And that's just a fact. That is absolutely a fact. There's a couple of my churches that I was never as good when I was there as I am now. Now that I've been gone for 20 years. Never, not ever. And Paul is saying, these people are saying this, and this about me, but I want you to be reminded of the truth. I live 2,000 miles from my family. And for the last 30 years, I've been going home like once a year. And all the time I'm away, people are speculating about who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm going to do in the future. And it's amazing to me when I get home what the gossip is about me and what's going on in my life. I got home one time, and I hadn't seen a couple of cousins for, I guess, 5 years. And by the time I got home, I had been divorced and had 3 kids. And at that time, none of that was true. And I still don't have the kids. But it's amazing to me. And Paul had been gone for a while, and these people had come in behind Paul, and they were saying these different things. They were trying to get the Corinthians to follow them. So let me tell you who these people were. They're not bad people. They are people who believe that Jesus is Messiah. But what they believed was that Jesus was Messiah, but the way to be saved was to accept Jesus and then become Jewish. The men had to be circumcised. All the Jewish practices had to be observed, and you couldn't really be a Christian until you became Jewish too. And Paul is combating that. He said, look, how easy it was for you to be liberated from what you were liberated from, and now you are letting these people infiltrate you, slander us, and enslave you. That's just not right. Let's see if there's any more I want to bring out in that. Verse 11. Such people should realize that we are in what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. I suspect Paul was always the same, in person or in absence. Okay, I will use this. I am when I moved to Central, and when I moved here, I know that my ministry here won't last forever. I know that. I'm not retiring this year or next year, the next year or the next year, but maybe the next year. So I have a limited amount of time. This is the very first time in my entire career that I went to a church knowing that I wasn't going to stay there forever. Now, you know that, but you don't know that. So I know that my time here is somewhat limited. Now, don't leave here and say, Pastor John's retiring now, okay? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is an expiration date. My wife wants me to retire at some point. She made a very interesting observance after about the first 6 months here. She said, your sermons are a lot more poignant. Your messages are more forceful. And I had to think about that. And that's true. It is true. Because I know what we need to get accomplished. And the time is limited. Does that make sense? And the time is limited. And so I don't have time to beat around the bush. Yeah, we don't. We just don't. Don't have time to beat around the bush. And Paul is the same. He's saying basically the same thing. He said, listen, we don't have time for this. When I get there, we will deal with this, because this is not something we can't allow to just continue. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, that's what Paul is saying in these last chapters. Questions, observations. Do not go out and tell people I'm leaving. Oh, social media, yeah. Okay, let's move on. We're in verse 12. We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves to some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they're not wise. We, however, will not boast beyond proper limits, but will confine our boasting to the field God has assigned to us, a field that reaches even to you. We are not going too far in our boasting, as would be the case if we had not come to you, for we did get as far as you with the gospel of Christ. Neither do we go beyond our limit by boasting of the work done by others. Our hope is that, as your faith continues to grow, our area of activity among you will be greatly expanded, so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you. For we do not want to boast about work already done in another man's territory. But let him who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. Did you like that statement about these people are comparing themselves with themselves? Yeah, he said that's not wise. That's not wise. Paul says we don't do that. If we're going to boast, it is going to be boasting in the fact that we were able to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ and have that impact on you. And if he says, and if God willing, what we will do is not as that grows within you, we will have an opportunity to minister to the regions beyond you. If you'll read in the missionary travels of Rome of Paul, that was his method. He would go into an area, build up a church there, and then use them as a springboard to go to the next region. Build that area up, use them as a springboard to go to the next region. And then he would use that core of support to go to other regions, to use as support to go to other regions. And Paul says that is what we intend to do. Now, these other people are there just for themselves. They are comparing themselves with themselves, and in comparing themselves with themselves, they look pretty good. But the truth is not, that is not the truth. The truth is, they are not in this for you. They are in this for themselves, so they can boast about making you Jews. And that's just putting it plainly. Paul says, for it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. Not the one who says, look how great I am. It's the one who lives a life worthy of the calling of Jesus Christ. All right, questions? Something you would like to add to this? Yes, ma'am. We call them the Judaizers. The Judaizers. They were people who they were Jewish people who believed in Jesus Christ, but they could not let go of the law and the ritual and all of that stuff. That Paul said, listen, Jesus filled that full. He is the fulfillment of the law. The law had a shelf life and it's done. He filled it full. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Right. 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 Absolutely, Marta. That is exactly. And you know, I believe that we have different seasons in our life. You have different seasons. There are seasons where you are a student, seasons where you are a parent, seasons where you're a grandparent, seasons that you're, and my God showed me that the last 15 years of my ministry was going to be in the area of mentoring, and so in the last 15 years, I've been doing an awful lot of mentoring and helping new ministers get a good start, and that's just been a part of what God has had me doing, and God showed me that pretty forcefully one day in my office. So that's where I'm at. So it's something that we all should ask ourselves, Martin, is where are we at? And what season of our life are we in, and what should we be doing during this season? All right. All right, let's look at chapter 11 real quick. Paul and the false apostles. This group that we've been talking about. I hope you will put up with a little of my foolishness, but you are already doing that. I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. But I am afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cutting, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. For if someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from than the one you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it easily enough. But I do not think that I am in the least inferior to these super apostles. I may not be a trained speaker, but I do have knowledge. We have made this perfectly clear to you in every way. Paul says, I'm jealous about you. What does he mean when he says, I'm jealous about you? Protective. Just as when your kids were in school or even right now, I don't care how old they are, you get protective of your kids. Paul says, I'm protective of you. I'm jealous for you. And what he's saying is, I see these people hurting you. I see these people deceiving you. I see these people adding a burden to you that you do not need to carry. Jesus talked about how the Pharisees put loads on people's back and never lifted a finger to help them carry them. And what Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He tried to unload the burden from people. And Paul had unloaded these folks. They had taught them the absolute truth. And now these false teachers, who Paul calls these super apostles, who think they're so much better than us, are trying to deceive them. Now, one of the things I want you to note, I don't know why I never thought about this before, but I always thought about Paul as being this great orator, this great speaker. Well, in this passage, he says he's not. He says, I may not be a good speaker, but I do have knowledge. I do have the truth. And that's what I want to share with you. And these folks are sharing falsehoods with you. All right, questions? Let us move forward. Was it a sin for me to lower myself in order to elevate you by preaching the gospel of God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. And when I was with you and needed something, I was not a burden to anyone, for the brothers who came with me came from Macedonia, supplied what I needed. I have kept myself from being a burden to you in any way, and will continue to do so. As surely as the truth of Christ is in me, nobody in the region of Achaia will stop this boasting of mine. Why? Because I do not love you? God knows I do. And I will keep on doing what I'm doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masqueraded as an angel of light. It is not surprising, then, if his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness, their end will be what their actions deserve. Pretty harsh. Pretty harsh. He says, first of all, you hear the sarcasm in his writing. First of all, let me apologize for not burdening you with asking you to pay me while I was there. Forgive me for that. Because what the false apostles were saying, well, the reason he didn't charge you is not worth anything. And Paul said, well, forgive me for that. Forgive me for that. And he said, but I determined, this is not by accident, I determined that that's what I wanted to do. I determined that what I wanted to do was to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to you without reservation, without hesitation, and without any kind of obligation on your part. And by the way, he says, I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to do that. He says, I have kept myself from being a burden to you, and I'm going to continue to do that. Verse 13, for such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, masquerading as apostles of Christ. They pretend. And he goes on to say, well, it's not surprising they're doing that. Their father, the devil, did the same thing. That is pretty harsh. His tone has definitely changed from the praise of what he had been saying. Okay, questions on that? Now, I've always appreciated this next section because it kind of, I knew all the things that Paul is going to be talking about in this next section, but he puts them all in one place. And I'm reminded of just what Paul went through in order to preach the gospel of Christ. I repeat, let no one take me for a fool. But if you do, then receive me just as you would a fool, so that I may do a little boasting. In this self-confident boasting, I am not talking as the Lord would, but as a fool. Since many are boasting in the way the world does, I too will boast. You gladly put up with fools since you are so wise. In fact, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you or exploits you or takes advantage of you or pushes himself forward and slaps you in the face. To my shame, I admit that we were too weak for that. We didn't do that. But you gladly put up with us. And you said, these people are exploiting you. Don't be deceived. Don't be fooled. These people do not have your best interest at mind. They have their own agenda in mind. They have their own agenda, not the agenda of God. And remember that. I have said this to you before. I have preached this on several occasions. I'm going to say it again, and you'll hear it again and again and again from me. Don't ever just swallow something I say because I say it. Don't say, well, John said it, it must be true. Okay? Just don't do that. I am going to do my very, 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 very best not to say anything false or wrong to you. And if I do, it will be because of my own ignorance. It won't be intentional. But just because I say it doesn't mean it's right. What the Church of Corinth issue was, or one of them, was these people claim to have some authority, claim to have some status, claim to be, quote unquote, something. And so the Corinthians were saying, well, it must be right. It must be right. They said it must be right. Don't do that with a minister, please. Don't do that with a minister. We will. I hope and I pray that the ministers that you have from now on will be absolutely honest, will be completely trustworthy, and will be very, very, very accurate in what they say. But all of us make mistakes, and all of us are wrong on some points. So just because a minister says it, don't swallow it. Okay? The problem with the church at Corinth, these people, these false apostles, were convincing them that they had this authority and that they could contradict what they had already learned. And they were very deceitful in how they did that. Most of the time they said, well, you know what Paul said was generally true. But what he didn't add, you need the rest of this, so let us add this to it. And Paul said, if you haven't gotten it from us, you don't need it. If you haven't gotten it from us, you don't need it. Let's move on to that next section here, and we'll come back for the rest of come back for questions on all of it. What anyone else dares to boast about, I'm speaking as a fool, I also dare to boast about. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. I have worked much harder. I have been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, have been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my own countrymen, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false brothers. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst. I have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak? I do not feel weak. Who is led into sin? And I do not inwardly burn. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the governor under King Artaeus had the city of Damascus guarded in order to arrest me. But I was lowered in a basket from a window in the wall and slipped through his hands. Paul says, you know what? These guys are bragging about who they are. Let me tell you what I have been through. And when I hear Paul saying that, I don't see it really as bragging, but I see it as a testimony as to what he has done in order to preach the gospel. He's saying, this is what I have done in order to preach the gospel. It is interesting when he says, I have been flogged more severely. Let's see. I have received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. That's significant. 40 lashes from a cat of 9 tails is supposed to kill a man. He said, I've had it 39 several times. When he was stoned in the book of Acts, he was stoned literally, they thought, to death. They stoned him, thought he was dead, drug him out of town by his heels, threw him on top of a garbage heap, left him there. And he walked back into town. So when he says, listen, these guys are bragging to you, let me tell you, here's the truth. This is what I've been through so that I can bring the gospel to you. And if I'm willing to do that, do you think I would deceive you? Do you think that I wouldn't give you the truth? Come on. I can just see him as a parent going, come on, listen to me. What is the absolute truth? Let's go back and think about this. Okay. Questions, observations? I like what Paul says. He says, if I must boast, I will boast about the things that show my weakness. Every time I read this, I think about my life, my ministry. When I first came, I think I shared this story with you, and if I didn't, forgive me. If I did, forgive me that too. But I, in high school, I wasn't shy. I've always been an introvert, but I'm not shy. Don't ever confuse those two. But I was petrified of speaking in front of people. I had a straight A average in an English class in the 10th grade and took a C in that class just to keep from giving an oral book report. That's me. And the area of my life, that area of my ministry that God has blessed the most has been preaching and teaching. I've always been pretty good at organizing and administrating that kind of stuff. But it's preaching and teaching. Those are the things that absolutely petrify me. And I think Paul says if I'm going to boast, I'm going to be boast about the things that I'm weakest at. And I think the reason that God has blessed those areas is the most is because I know that if God does not enable me, I can't do it. And so I depend on him during those activities more than during other activities. Does that make sense? That's just the absolute fact. To this day, I still don't eat on Sunday morning until after I preach. And if that means it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon before I get to eat, so be it. I don't eat before I preach on Sunday morning because I get a severe upset stomach. So anyway, just remember, and I share that with you just to say that just because you're weak in an area, don't let that bother you. God can use that weakness and help you. If God calls you to it, he'll help you through it. All right, questions, observations, complaints. Okay, I think it's just good for two things today. Some cowboy wisdom. Are you up for some cowboy wisdom? And how about the mistakes people make? To show you how old these are, this is mistakes that people make with typewriters. So just to know how old some of this is, and this one right here is, it was from 99. So it's 24 years old. Cowboy Guide to Life. Number 1, don't squat with your spurs on. Don't be interfering with something that ain't bothering you none. Time has a lot to do with the outcome of a rain dance. Timing has a lot to do with the outcome of a rain dance. The easiest way to eat crow is while it's still warm. The colder it gets, the harder it is to swallow. If you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. If it don't seem like it's worth the effort, it's probably not. It don't take a genius to spot a goat in a flock of sheep. The biggest, I like this one, the biggest troublemaker you ever have to deal with watches you wash or shave their face every day. Think about that one. Never ask a barber if you need a haircut. If you get to thinking you're a person of some influence, try ordering somebody else's dog around. I'm sorry about this one, but don't worry about biting off more than you can chew. Your mouth is probably a lot bigger than you think. Generally, you ain't learning if your mouth's ajaring. If you're riding ahead of the herd, take a look back every now and then and make sure it's still there with you. All right? I've got one to add to that is if you're leading and nobody's following, you're just out for a stroll. Good judgment comes from experience, and a whole lot of that comes from bad judgment. When you're throwing your weight around, be ready to have it thrown around by somebody else. Letting the cat out of the bag is a whole lot easier than putting it back in. I like this one as well, and I've used this one recently. Always take a good look at what you're about to eat. It's not so important to know what it is, but it sure is critical to know what it was. The quickest way to double your money is to fold it over and put it back in your pocket. And last but not least, and we'll have to look up like this so nobody will think I'm talking to them. Never miss a good opportunity to shut up. Okay. Thank God for people with typewriters. This is an announcement in a church bulletin for National Prayer and Fasting Conference. The cost of attending the fasting conference will include meals. This morning's sermon, Jesus walks on water. Tonight's sermon, searching for Jesus. Ladies, don't forget the rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of all those things not worth keeping around the house. Don't forget to bring your husbands. Oh. The peacemaking meeting scheduled for today has been canceled due to conflict. Don't let worry kill you. Let the church help. Mrs. Charlene Manson will sing, "I Will Not Pass This Way Again," giving obvious pleasure to the congregation. For those of you who have children and don't know it, there's a nursery downstairs. Okay. Next Thursday, there will be tryouts for the choir. They need all the help they can get. Barbara remains, this is a small church. It just says Barbara remains in the hospital. Barbara remains in the hospital and needs blood donors for more transfusion. She is also having trouble sleep and requests tapes of Pastor John's sermons. The rector, the pastor, will preach his farewell message, after which the choir will sing, "Break Forth into Joy." And I apologize for this one. A bean supper will be held on Tuesday evening in the church hall. Music will follow. Eight new choir robes are currently needed due to the addition of several new members to the choir and the deterioration of older ones. Oh. At the evening service tonight, the sermon topic will be, "What is Hell?" come early and listen to our choir practice. You got to watch how you say things, you know. You really do. Scouts are saving aluminum cans, bottles, and other items to be recycled. The proceeds will be used to cripple children. Potluck supper Sunday at 5 p.m. Prayer and medication will follow. No, not doing that one. This evening at 7 p.m., there will be a hymn sing in the park across from the church. Bring a basket and come prepared to sin. Ladies' Bible study will be held Thursday morning at 10 a.m. All ladies are invited to the lunch in the fellowship hall after the BS is done. As you go into your world, go with a smile on your face, and don't let other people put a burden on you that God does not. In Jesus' name, amen.